95%.
Yeah.
I mean, think about that number for a second. According to today's source material, 95% of all humans who've ever lived, like past and present, have spent their lives fundamentally defined by distress, pain, sorrow, anxiety, and fear.
It is a staggering number. I mean, it's an almost suffocating statistic to start with. It really forces you to completely halt and just reevaluate everything.
Right, because usually when we look back at human history, we're taught to view it as this grand, steady march of progress. You know, like we started in caves, we figured out agriculture, built the printing press, and eventually we put a rover on Mars.
The whole triumphant narrative.
Exactly. We like to think things are always getting better, that we're the apex of a successful civilization. But imagine flipping that lens entirely.
Right.
What if, instead of a highlight reel of achievements, you looked at the entirety of human history, and this is a direct quote from the text we're diving into today, a tale of suffering and tears.
Well, if you accept that premise, that the vast, overwhelming majority of human beings who have ever drawn breath have basically lived lives of misery, then you have to ask a very uncomfortable question.
Which is?
Can we really call the way we've organized ourselves a success? Or is the operating system of humanity fundamentally flawed from the ground up?
And that is the exact starting point for our deep dive today. We are unpacking a highly radical, incredibly provocative piece of writing from 2015.
Yeah, by an author named Xu Feng.
Right. It's titled, Envisioning the Reconstruction of Human Values and Production Life Order. And let me tell you, the author doesn't just complain about the state of the world or, suggest we tweak a few tax laws.
Not at all.
They argue that this massive scale of human suffering is absolute proof that our previous value systems are completely broken.
So the mission today is to explore that central argument, this idea that to cure this 95% suffering rate, it's time to just completely rebuild the order of human life.
From scratch, basically.
Right. And what makes this text so compelling is that Chauvin lays out a specific four-part blueprint to fix the world.
Yeah, and these aren't minor policy shifts we're talking about here.
They're massive structural upheavals.
Okay, so let's unpack this blueprint, because the ideas presented here challenge absolutely everything we take for granted about how human beings interact.
They really do.
And just to set the table for you listening, our goal today is to act as neutral explorers of a massive thought experiment. We're putting these ideas under the microscope to see how the mechanics of this proposed utopia actually function.
Exactly. We're just examining the underlying logic of how the author thinks we can reconstruct the order of human life.
So where do we even begin with a reconstruction like this?
Well, let's start with where the author begins. To fix a world where 95% of people suffer, you might expect a manifesto to start with, macroeconomics, or maybe military disarmament.
Climate change.
Right. But the author goes straight to the most intimate micro level of human organization possible. They go right for the home.
They target the traditional family.
Yes.
The text claims that the traditional model of marriage and family life is a breeding ground for selfishness and troubles, and it argues it must be entirely replaced by a new model.
Just let that sink in for a second. The institution that almost every culture on Earth views as the foundational building block of a healthy society.
Marriage and the nuclear family.
Exactly. It's identified here as patient zero for global suffering.
I mean, I have to push back on this, or at least try to untangle the logic here. Because society usually views the traditional family as a safe haven, right?
Sure.
It's your refuge from a harsh, unforgiving world. You go out, you face the economic grind, you navigate politics, and then you come home to your family where you are ostensibly safe and unconditionally loved.
That's the ideal, yeah.
So how did the author look at that and see a breeding ground for selfishness?
Well, it's a matter of perspective. You see a safe haven, the author sees a walled garden.
A walled garden. Okay, expand on that.
Think about the biological and psychological imperatives of the family unit. You build a wall around your spouse and your children, and you basically say, these are my people.
Right.
I will protect them, I will gather resources for them, and I'll ensure their survival and success, even if it means someone outside this wall goes without.
Oh, wow. So it inherently creates an us versus them dynamic.
Exactly, at the most cellular level of society.
So the argument is that the fierce loyalty you feel for your family is practically indistinguishable from selfishness on a broader societal level. I mean, that is a very tough pill to swallow.
It is.
Loving your kids is considered like the most selfless thing a person can do.
But consider how that love manifests in the real world, right? Why do people hoard massive amounts of wealth well beyond what they could ever spend in a lifetime?
Usually to pass it down to their children,
Right. Why do people engage in nepotism?
to advance their family members, sure.
Exactly. And why do local tribal conflicts start? Often to protect family land or resources or honor. The author is establishing a ruthless cause and effect here.
So they're arguing that as long as humanity divides itself into these tiny, fiercely competitive micro-factions called families, we'll never have true global harmony.
Precisely. If the root of global suffering starts at this micro level, then no amount of macro level policy changes, like, I don't know, signing international peace treaties or passing wealth redistribution laws, will ever fundamentally work.
Because the core problem is still there.
Right. Unless this breeding ground is neutralized, humanity will just keep generating new conflicts. We'll keep finding loopholes in the laws to benefit our own children at the expense of others.
It's a fascinating but honestly terrifying logic. So let's say we follow this thread. We tear down the walls of the private family. We eliminate the home as a walled-off unit of self-interest.
Okay.
But if I don't have a private family home to retreat to, where do I go to just exist?
Yeah.
Where do I go to be away from the collective eye? Like what happens to the other walls we build, like our friend groups, our private clubs, our businesses?
The author's answer to that is essentially nowhere. And that naturally leads into the next major pillar of this reconstruction. The author demands that all global affairs, scaling all the way down to small social groups, must be entirely transparent.
Entirely transparent.
Yes. And the phrasing here is aggressive. Society must be actively suppressing any secretive activities.
Okay, this sounds like forcing humanity to live in a literal panopticon. I mean, it's one thing to advocate for open government or corporate transparency. Most people would rally behind that.
Sure, sunshine is the best disinfectant and all that.
Right. But demanding total transparency for small social groups, that is a massive escalation of surveillance.
It is the complete and utter eradication of the private sphere.
Let's think about the mechanics of this for a second. If my friends and I have a private group chat, or we meet for a private book club, is that considered a secretive activity?
Under this framework, yes.
So how do you actively suppress all secretive activities without creating a terrifying, omnipresent surveillance state?
Well, what's fascinating here is I think we have to look past the cliche of a glass house or a surveillance state with cameras on every corner. Think of it more like turning human social interaction into open source software.
Open source software. Okay, I like that analogy. Break that down for me.
So in open source software, the code is visible to everyone, right?
Mhm.
Anyone can audit it. Anyone can see what the program is doing in the background.
Yeah.
The author seems to view human secrets as malicious code, like bugs or viruses that run hidden in the background of society and cause crashes. By making every social group and every interaction entirely transparent, you are essentially crowdsourcing the auditing of human behavior.
But what is so inherently dangerous about a secret? I mean, if my book club isn't plotting to overthrow the government, why does it need to be audited by the collective?
And that is the friction point of the author's underlying philosophy. In this proposed new order, privacy is treated as a danger to world peace. The author seems to equate any desire for secrecy with a conspiracy against the collective good. If you have nothing to hide, the logic goes, why do you need a closed door? Why do you need encrypted messages?
It's the ultimate extreme of the if you've done nothing wrong, you have nothing to fear argument.
Yes, and look at the absolute nature of the language in the text. Entirely transparent, suppressing any secretive activities. There is zero gray area here.
They aren't leaving any room for interpretation.
No. The author doesn't say mostly transparent except for your personal diary. They are identifying the hidden, unobserved spaces of human interaction as the dark corners where that 95% of human suffering is incubated.
Because if you can't scheme in private, you can't plot against your neighbor.
Exactly.
It really ties back beautifully to the destruction of the family unit, actually. If you don't have a private family and you're forbidden from having private social groups, you have nowhere to retreat. Factions simply cannot form.
Right. You are completely exposed, but also completely integrated into the macro collective.
But here is where the rubber meets the road for me. To enforce a world with no traditional families and absolutely zero secrets, you can't just rely on your local city council.
Definitely not.
You can't run a totally transparent, unified global collective with a fragmented, locally elected political system.
Which brings us to the third structural pillar of this text, a radical, unprecedented reshuffling of global governance. The author outlines a vision where all regional administrative officials are appointed directly by the United Nations.
Meaning local elections are completely abolished.
Completely.
And the text gives some highly specific, truly startling examples from the year this was written, 2015. Wait, they actually suggested Vladimir Putin could be appointed to run North America.
Yep.
And Barack Obama could be assigned to run the Middle East. And Xi Jinping for the European Union. That is a wild mental image.
It really is. And just to interject a quick reality check for you listening, again, this was written in 2015. We are strictly looking at this as a historical thought experiment to understand the author's framework.
Right, exactly. We're not taking any political sides or endorsing these specific political draft picks.
No, but the sheer shock value of those examples is incredibly deliberate.
Oh, it's a massive shock to the system. It's like a mandatory global foreign exchange student program, but for nuclear-armed world leaders.
That's a great way to put it.
Or, think of it in corporate restructuring terms. It's like a corporate board forcing the CEO of your most bitter rival company to suddenly come in and run your specific division.
Right.
Just imagine waking up tomorrow, turning on the news, and finding out your right to vote in local elections is gone, and a foreign leader has been appointed by the UN to govern your region. The outrage would be immeasurable.
Most people would feel entirely disenfranchised. But let's dig into the mechanical logic here. Why would the author suggest a system that seems scientifically designed to provoke maximum outrage?
Yeah, what's the end game?
The author is trying to structurally engineer the death of nationalism.
How does swapping leaders across the globe achieve that?
Well, think about what causes geopolitical friction. It's historical grievances, territorial disputes, and deep-seated national loyalties. A leader elected locally is entirely beholden to local interests.
Right.
Their mandate is to make sure their specific country wins, often at the direct expense of other nations. They have to play to the cultural baggage and the historical pride of their voter base.
Okay, I see where this is going.
If you take a leader and strip them of their geographic, cultural, and political base, like if you put an American in charge of the Middle East or a Russian in charge of North America, they have zero local ties.
Right. They have no historical grievances in that specific region to avenge.
Exactly. They have no baked-in loyalties or ethnic biases toward the local population.
They become pure administrators. They're effectively severed from the emotional baggage of the land they govern.
Yes. And more than that, the selfishness of national interests evaporates because the very structure of government no longer allows for it. The leader is accountable only to the United Nations.
To the global collective.
Right? Not to a local constituency demanding special treatment. It is an extreme, purely structural solution to a deeply emotional human problem.
Wow.
The author believes that you can't just ask people nicely to stop being nationalistic. You have to actively break the machinery of the nation state.
Here's where I have a massive aha moment with this text. The author is essentially arguing that democracy and local autonomy are the causes of human pain, not the cures.
Exactly.
We usually think of voting and representation as the pinnacle of human freedom. But this text looks at democracy and says, no, that's just a system that allows people to vote for their own selfish interests over the needs of the global whole.
It's a brilliant way to frame it. It flips our entire Western democratic paradigm on its head.
It really does.
By stripping away all local representation, the author believes they are freeing citizens from the cycle of suffering. The proposed cure for the world's ills is basically a form of benevolent, transparent, global authoritarianism.
But let's be real for a second. If you abolish the family and all privacy and cancel local elections to replace them with foreign administrators, people are not going to sit back and say, cool, thanks to the New World Order.
No, they would not.
They are going to resist with everything they have. You can't just implement this without triggering absolute global chaos.
And the author actually anticipates this skepticism, which leads us to the fourth and final pillar, what we might call the meta-solution for the whole text.
Okay, what is it?
It's the author's profound reliance on what they term unconventional thinking, or thinking beyond the ordinary.
The text is very explicit about this, actually. It argues that only extraordinary thinking can illuminate a path to world peace and happiness.
Right.
The author literally says, only with unconventional thinking can the divine open possibilities. They are essentially setting up a rhetorical fortress here.
A rhetorical fortress. I like that.
Yeah, they're saying, yes, my ideas sound crazy and unworkable to you, but that's simply because you are trapped in the ordinary thinking of a broken system.
It's a fascinating intellectual defense mechanism. By framing their blueprint as extraordinary, they preemptively dismiss any standard logistical or psychological criticism.
Right. If you point out that human biology drives us to protect our kids or that the global economy would collapse during this transition,
The author can simply apply, well, you are still applying the logic of the system that caused the 95% suffering rate. You aren't thinking big enough.
it's an analogy of scope. If society is a machine, the author isn't trying to write a patch for a bug in the code.
No.
They aren't even trying to build a better engine. They're trying to reinvent the concept of physics itself so the machine operates on entirely new laws.
That is exactly what they're doing.
But I am highly skeptical of the gap between this theory and reality. The text insists that implementing this grand, society-shattering vision is, quote, not really challenging.
Yes.
They claim human wisdom is more than enough to pull it off, and they boldly state they already have a concrete plan for a well-organized transition that will not lead to global chaos.
And this raises an important question, right? It brings up the deepest paradox of the entire document.
How so?
We started this deep dive with the author's incredibly bleak assessment of history, that 95% of all humans have lived lives defined by distress and sorrow.
The ultimate pessimistic view of the human track record.
Right. We've basically failed at being happy for thousands of years. But then, juxtaposed against that massive historical failure, the author has absolute unwavering faith in human wisdom to flawlessly execute an unprecedented, highly unnatural global overhaul.
Oh, wow. Yeah, the contrast is crazy.
To look at a species that you believe has failed 95% of the time and confidently state, yes, this same species can peacefully abolish the family, happily surrender all privacy, and accept unelected foreign administrators without a drop of chaos.
It is a staggering, almost incomprehensible level of optimism.
It's bordering on utopian delusion.
Definitely. There is a monumental gulf between saying, let's swap all the world's leaders to end nationalism, and actually executing a smooth, peaceful transition where billions of people just comply.
Yes. The author leans entirely on this hidden concrete plan, but we don't get to see the nuts and bolts of it in this text. We just get the grand guarantee that human wisdom can figure it out.
And that reliance on a leap in human consciousness, its extraordinary thinking, is basically the engine of the whole blueprint.
Absolutely. Without the assumption that humans are capable of suddenly abandoning their deepest biological and cultural instincts, the first 3 points, abolishing the family, enforcing total transparency, restructuring global governance, are just impossible, tyrannical demands.
But framed through the lens of unconventional thinking, the author presents them as the hidden keys to paradise.
It really requires an enormous leap of faith from the reader.
You really have to trust the unseen plan. Let's take a step back and just look at the sheer scale of the journey we've taken today.
It's been a lot.
We started from this incredibly heavy premise that human existence is fundamentally defined by pain. And to cure that historical disease, we explored a radical 4-part treatment.
Right. Tearing down the walled gardens of our family units to end micro-selfishness.
Enforcing total, relentless transparency like an open-source society to prevent factions.
Swapping global leaders via the UN to structurally execute nationalism.
And finally, relying on a profound leap of extraordinary thinking to pull the whole thing off without a hitch.
It is a massive amount of philosophical weight to process. And for you listening, I want to bring it back to that tantalizing final sentence in the source material.
The concrete plan.
Yes. The author claims to have a concrete plan for a well-organized transition, though it remains hidden from the text we've analyzed today. We don't get to see the architectural blueprints, we only get to see the artist's rendering of the finished utopian building.
It's the ultimate cliffhanger. Like, I know how to save the world, but I'll show you the math later.
It really is. But this is why studying radical frameworks like this one is so incredibly valuable, even if we vehemently disagree with the methods, or even if we find the implications terrifying.
Yeah, it forces you to think.
Engaging with a text like this acts as a mirror. It forces us to critically examine the everyday structures we are deeply embedded in.
That's a great point.
We rarely stop in our daily lives to ask why we hoard resources for our nuclear families, or why we value the encryption on our group chats, or why we firmly believe that local democracy is the only valid way to govern. A blueprint this extreme highlights the assumptions we don't even realize we're making.
It absolutely shakes the etch-a-sketch of your worldview. It makes you realize that What we call human nature is largely just the structures we've grown accustomed to.
Exactly.
So I want to leave you with one last thing to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. Let's assume, just for the sake of the thought experiment, that the author is completely right about the premise. If 95% of human history truly has been a tale of suffering and tears, does the burden of fixing it require us to abandon everything that makes us recognizably human today?
That is the question.
If the absolute ironclad guarantee of world peace meant giving up your right to privacy, surrendering your local autonomy, and dismantling the exclusive walls of your family, what would you be willing to sacrifice?